Welcome back to the PGA edition of the Daily Fantasy Flex podcast. This is Bryan. I'm joined, as always, by Colin and Pete. Guys, what's going on?
First, congratulations are in order. Congratulations to Dustin Johnson for winning, and by extension, Bryan for closing out the pick'em pool for, I guess we're calling this the end of the season, right? We kind of got a 3-week break coming up, but I guess we'll put your name on the trophy for year one pick'em when we get made. I also owe a congratulations to North Carolina. Illinois, North Carolina was during our off week this week. And since I lost the bet here, having gone to Illinois, I have to say nice things about the 2005 UNC championship basketball team.
What a great team it was.
This is just bringing back. I'm getting PTSD all over again.
Mm-hmm.
Jawad Williams is just has a nice soul, I guess. I don't even remember. Rashad McCants, upstanding citizen. Sean May plays solid fundamentals and did not get a bunch of horseshit calls on James Augustine in the championship game. Does that count as, I don't know, Raymond Felton, just the clinical model of fitness in the NBA, really just the standard. And Marvin Williams just lives up to expectations all the time. So Bryan, I couldn't do it without getting passive aggressive. I'm sorry. That wasn't even worth it. I'm never doing that prop bet again. That was terrible. All right. Let's move on to the PGA slate. I need to get that taste out of my mouth.
Yeah. I'll transition it for you. Bryan, congrats with DJ. It's been a ton of fun this year. Very excited to keep the pod going. And obviously we got a lot of big tournaments coming up down the road. This is a nice one here, but a little golf break coming up will actually be nice with all the other sports going on.
Yeah, for sure. And so if you don't know the PGA season, I guess it sort of runs all year round. It's going to start back up in a couple weeks, but the season runs until October. So this is officially the last tournament of the season. It is the end of the FedEx Cup. So this is going to be the last tournament for the PGA season. Then there'll be like a 3-week break before it starts back up. So we're going to have a little break before we resume our pod. But this is an interesting tournament. So let's jump right into it. So this is the Tour Championship. It's at East Lake Golf Club in Atlanta, Georgia. It's been there for about a decade now. It's sort of flip-flopped before that, but it's been there pretty consistently. So I think we have some pretty good data on the course. But there's some really interesting parts of this tournament and playing it on DraftKings, which we're going to get to in just a second. But first, Colin, what sort of course is this, and was it set up? What sort of golfers typically do well here?
So this is a par 70. We would expect it to be an accuracy course, and it is, but it's debatably the weakest that I've seen, like the weakest course fit I've probably seen all year in PGA. And I think a lot of that is influenced by essentially way lower sample size. You know, like normally when you have a full slate of 150 or whatever, you have a lot of data to tease out course fit. But when it's reduced to 30 every single year, the conservative data-driven approach says you have to draw weaker conclusions. So I would rate it as an accuracy course, but it's coming out as probably the weakest course fit, maybe on the order of like a quarter or even like an eighth of your normal course fit. Pete, you probably agree that it's an accuracy course, but like, what do you make of the fact that it's a weaker course fit? Because like, we don't really talk about magnitude of course fit a whole lot. Is that something that you ever price in, like magnitude of course fit, or just kind of general guideline selection?
I don't even know if it's an accuracy course, to be honest. I know it's a par 70, and it doesn't surprise me that it doesn't bear out that strongly as an accuracy course because it's relatively long. It's really long for a par 70. There's a lot of long par 4s. Long irons are going to be a big part of playing well here. So I don't know. And the other thing, too, is par 5 scoring. There's only 2 par 5s, but there's not as many birdie opportunities at this course from what I've read. So I'm struggling to figure out kind of how to attack it. So I'm not really looking at accuracy or driving distance. I'm looking at it, but I'm not weighting one significantly more than the other because long iron stuff really seems to be critical at this course.
I don't know. Maybe we're coming to the same conclusion about, like, I have very little, like, confidence in the magnitude of course fit. You kind of come at it from an errors cancel out type of thing. I think we're justified in saying course fit is not as big this week.
So here's my thought, Colin, and I had mentioned this on multiple pods before, and we sort of haven't really ever put data to this, but this is my course fit only matters once you hit a certain talent level threshold. So the fact, and this sort of is going to get into some of our conversations on how to attack this tournament in general. There's only 30 golfers in this tournament. It's by far the smallest. It's the end of the FedEx end of the season. So there's only 30 golfers playing in it. So like Pete, for example, like what sort of course doesn't fit Jason Day?
When you have to be accurate off the tee, it's not as good for Jason Day.
But you're sort of stretching, right?
Yeah, I mean he's the best golfer in the world, but he can't, when he has to hit his driver a ton and he's not doing well with his driver, he can really spray it, which can get him into trouble. He's fantastic short game, best golfer in the world, so he's going to do pretty well anywhere he plays.
That's sort of my point. Yeah, once you sort of get to just a small group of the most talented golfers in the world, it's sort of like course fit doesn't matter that much. Like, sure, it's sort of a bigger deal for our fringe golfers on a weekly basis that are either really good at distance but don't have the short game, or really accurate but don't necessarily have the distance, and you can sort of exploit the salary issues in their DraftKings salary because of that. But once you have like the most talented golfers, it seems like they sort of just fit every course. I don't know.
I get what you're saying, and I think it's really applicable this week. I do think that in certain situations, if we had a strong, long course, really long course for driving distance, really matters. I think there could be a big bump for bombers or accuracy.
Mm-hmm.
If the course was set up right, even with these golfers, because there still are, like Matt Kuchar is a much different golfer than JB Holmes. And I think that certain courses would play well to one of those guys versus the other. But yeah, in this particular spot, I'm not very confident in terms of what type of course fit is going to be great here, because, like I said, it's over 7,300 yards and it's only a par 70. So, like, there's some really long holes that aren't par fives that require, either a really good long drive or really good long iron play. And I think long iron play is something that I've actually looked at quite a bit, trying to identify guys who might be, better at that than other aspects of their game.
Interesting. And this is going to get into Bryan, to your point, before, it's actually something you brought up, is that, like, one thing I was thinking about with your whole theory of course fit matters less as far as like when overall skill level takes over. This is an atypical field, and that the talent level is super concentrated, right? It's almost like you have the cream of the crop here type of thing. And when a talent pool is that concentrated with high-end people, I can see that distorting and just being like, if you try to staple on your usual course fit routine, it's not really wired for an all-star tournament, essentially. Mm-hmm. So all of the above, that it just makes me want to go back and actually test your theory during our 3-week off season, if that's what we're calling it.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting study to be done. So this sort of just gets into our section where we just sort of talk about strategy, because this is just a unique tournament. There's only 30 golfers, so I think there's a question of how to attack a tournament with only 30 golfers. They still have the same sort of pricing discrepancy. There's guys that are 6K and it goes all the way up to guys that are close to 11K. So you still have the same sort of top to bottom difference between the golfers, but there's just much fewer golfers to pick. So I think it's a really interesting tournament to talk about strategy, because there's nothing like it. Pete, just in general, what are your first thoughts on just having 30 golfers and what that does to just playing in tournaments and cash games this week?
It's tough. It's just not – cash games are definitely not as viable as they are other weeks. There's going to be a ton of overlap. I love golf, so I'll have a lot of exposure, but this is going to be a lot of tournament entries. But this is a week where, I hate to say it, but I think the skill edge is just smaller than other spots. There's 30 golfers, there's no cuts. It's all the guys that everyone knows. So it's tough. I hate to say it because I love it so much, but it's definitely a tough week.
Do you think there might be some NFL money in there, though?
Yeah, I think there'll be some NFL money, which will be nice. I definitely have head-to-heads posted, but I don't plan on playing double-ups or 50-50s or anything like that. And certainly think, higher stakes stuff might be a little bit more challenging than other weeks with this field.
Yeah, we've talked about it before. Sometimes the adjustment is your skill edge is lesser and you have less action. And it's not necessarily I know where you're coming from, where it's like you hate it when that's the right answer, but sometimes there's literally nothing you can do and your degrees of freedom are essentially limited to maneuver and just there's less skill edge. Sometimes that is the right play, so just bet less. I think that's the correct play this week.
Yeah, that's definitely fair. So I definitely do want to talk about a little bit more strategy, game theory idea of how to construct the lineup. But I think we're going to sort of tie that into our conversation once we just sort of dive into the players. I think it's sort of hard to discuss that until we really get into where the players are in relation to each other in the salary range. So let's actually dive into the players for this week. So again, there's only 30 players. So I actually am dividing this up so we can sort of systematically do this. I said it's the same sort of top to bottom breakdown. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take them in just groups of 10. So we'll do the bottom 10, which is going to be guys 7K and lower. Then we'll do the middle one, just 7 to 8-1. And then we can break up the last one. There's sort of a distinct difference between the top 10. There's sort of the top 5 guys with the big 4, if you want to call them an Adam Scott, and then the guys below them. So let's start with the lower guys. And Colin, I'll start with you. So guys that are 7K and under, out of that group, if you wanted to go stars and scrubs and you wanted to, take a guy in that lower range, who in that group stands out the most to you right now?
So it should be no surprise that Emiliano Grillo is at the top of the list. I mean, he's him to be at the top of our list always, but especially this week, I think he's just a top 25 golfer, like in my opinion overall. To see him at the bottom of the price range, I think he'll be pretty popular. And the one that I'm still high on, and it's almost like despite his course history here, is Kevin Kisner, who I think I've just been on for all of the FedEx Cup, and he has not disappointed in the slightest. To see him at the bottom of the pricing, I think that I also wonder how popular he'll be as kind of like essentially the bottom of the list. But I still think he represents value, just kind of too good overall. If you're more of a course history fan for your lower tier, I think Ryan Moore is hands down the play this week. I forget his exact results, but he pops easily the highest of anybody in the lower tier. But that's pretty much it in my order. Grillo, Kisner, and Moore.
Grillo for me, that's it. And maybe I think Moore is the course history fit. But building lineups, I haven't made as many with both. I guess I'll include some Ryan Moore for the course history. Another guy that I've heard get some love that I don't hate in this spot, I guess, is Siwoo Kim. But yeah, just give me Grillo and move on. It's kind of how I'm thinking. I like some guys in the cheap sevens a lot more than anyone in this range.
I'll pick a brief fight then. So why do you disagree with Kisner, or do you just not have an opinion?
I mean, I don't disagree with Kisner.
I'm trying to pick a fight.
There's no there's not yeah, Kisner's fine. But I
know he pops his he pops as the highest value on the slate, so that's why I'm kind of like, okay.
Yeah, because his price is $6,100. I mean, I get that, but I would take Grillo from this range. I'm not gonna.
Yeah, we're in agreement with that. So all right, yeah, it's because
I like Kisner maybe more than I would. I would prefer Kisner over Siwoo Kim, who I just threw out there. I think they're close, but yeah, in the low sevens, there's a ton of guys that I really like, and I just don't see myself playing Kisner this week.
Okay.
Nah or Duff, anyone?
Nah should be mentioned. I should have mentioned Nah, but again, Nah in this spot. I mean, so much of the value with Kevin Na is just how consistent he is, not missing cuts, and he has played really well. He's had a ton of top 25s and whatnot, but I don't know.
Same thing with Duffner too. He's a cut maker.
Yeah, just like 2 cut makers and a non-cut making thing. And I don't hate those plays. I certainly think they're fine. That's the problem with this whole tournament in general. It's like every single player is probably not that bad of a play.
Yeah.
Well, so the problem is they wanted to keep the same top to bottom difference. They wanted to have guys in the 11K range. They wanted to have guys in the 6K range. So what they did to just artificially make that happen is they just spread out the guys who would normally be in a normal tournament, like guys like Na and Grillo, who would be probably in the 8-9 range, they just put them in the 6K range. So it's going to probably, for a lot of people, those guys are going to pop in models, right? Just because they're the ones that are being pushed down to be values, which sort of makes it hard to build lineups, because you're like, wow, okay, if I can get Grillo, if I can get all these guys at such a low value, but it's sort of, at that point, everyone's sort of like that, you know?
Yeah, I'm wondering how that'll affect, like, especially in something like the championship finalists here. Is everybody? I mean, like in a no cut, I think we all generally lean stars and scrubs. And at what point do you go balance just for the sake of, I guess, differentiation? There's no, like, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it's certainly tough, and yeah, a lot of guys that you're not used to seeing at this price range are down lower, and they had to do that because of the way the tournament's structured. And kudos to DraftKings; they actually made the pricing pretty interesting, and it is still fun to make lineups even with only 30 options. But a lot of these guys that were more expensive. I mean, you look at someone like Grillo, who I absolutely love. We've been on him all year.
Mm-hmm.
His salary has fluctuated so much over the last little bit of time. I mean, he went from 6,900 at the PGA Championship, where we loved him, and then to 9,600 to 8,300 to 9K to 8,500. Now he's back at 69. So there's a lot of price movement like that, which is normally a good sign to buy. But you can't just take this tournament, and compare it to every other tournament, because there's only 30 golfers, and DraftKings had to price people accordingly so you can make lineups.
Pete, this is maybe a little of a abstract question. Should you roster golfers that you don't think have a chance of being in the top 3? What upside should you go for in a golfer?
I think you're just chasing birdies really more than anything. The other thing too is no one's really going to withdraw on this spot because there's so much money. I mean, first place in this gets $10 million. So that is a nice thing, which I guess we can talk about with Jason Day here later. But I think you're just chasing the scoring. You're chasing the DraftKings scoring here. And, maybe a guy doesn't finish top 3, but he can still be top 5 DraftKings golfer or whatever. So I do think you have to factor an upside more in this spot than almost any other tournament. But, that's kind of the reason I'm not considering – I shouldn't say not considering, but I'm not quite as high on like Kevin Na and Jason Huffman.
Yeah, Na was the guy that I was thinking about, because, he's going to be fine, but he probably doesn't have a great chance of getting a top 3 spot. So it's just sort of like, at that point, do you even want him in your lineup? Colin, do you have any thoughts in that regard, just upside in this tournament versus other weeks?
So my default when I did the study last time was upside, especially for winning GPP, is upside is overrated, and you just want to go for cut makers and give yourself as many bullets. I don't know if that applies in a no cut. But the only reason I kind of be skeptical of that is the only time that I've tried to look at like upside as far as like putting it into model or something like that, like is it repeatable? I'm not necessarily sure that it is. We talk about upside like as a concept that, is like, oh, of course you want to like get it as though it is a predictable, repeatable quantity. But I'm still not necessarily sure that it actually exists in PGA. That's kind of a hot take. Like I'm more looking for I'm not convinced that's necessarily true. But like I don't know. It's only because the only time I looked at it, I'm loath to include it just for my first pass the numbers.
Yeah, that's fair. It's sort of hard to figure out which of the just general heuristics that we like to apply to our lineup building that we should apply to this weekend. And there may be a chance that you just sort of throw all of the knowledge you have about PGA lineup building in a normal week out the window because it's so unique. All right, let's move on to the next tier. So it's going to be the next 10 guys, which is going to be 7 to 8-1. So this is going to be Berger to Phil. Pete, I'll start with you on this group.
All right, so there's a lot of guys that I like. So starting in the cheap range, I think Berger is a really good play. I like him quite a bit. I think he has a ton of upside in this spot. Love Justin Thomas, actually, here, too. I saw a couple things I liked with him and talked with some other sharp guys there on Justin Thomas. He definitely can string together a ton of birdies as well. He was pretty high on the weighted birdie average before, and I think he has quite a few birdie streaks as well relative to his price. So I think he's a great play. And then Roberto Castro, who Colin has been on all year, I think is a really intriguing play. Played awesome 2 weeks ago. I think he's certainly in consideration. Probably will garner a decent bit of ownership as well. Moving up, I like Schwartzel a good bit in this spot. I'm going to save JB Holmes for Colin. We'll talk about him at some point after Colin talks about him. And then I also really like Matsuyama moving all the way up to 8,600. I love the birdie making that Matsuyama possesses, and I think this is a great spot for him. And I was pretty encouraged with his performance. So I think that's kind of the main guys that I'm looking at in this range. I think Bubba is another guy you could definitely consider, but curious to hear Colin Davies' take on this and how high he is on JB Holmes.
What do we say our cap is for this range again? I thought it was 8,100.
Yeah, and Pete just blew by it. It's okay.
You do this like every time. I swear, this is right here. Like, we need the around the horn like mute button.
I thought it used to be 9K. I clearly wasn't paying attention here because we're doing 4 tiers and so.
Yeah, I know. Just like no, like Bryan already called it. We have to throw our normal rules for tournaments out the window because it's so unique. So I'm going to stick to the rules and
stick to the rules. I fucked up.
Yeah. All right. So. I agree that Berger is probably the best value in the tier. Like, I could see him his way into a lot of lineups. Probably the best favorite overall. I don't see Justin Thomas and Castro the way that you do, actually. I think Castro has course history and it's course fit. That's fine. But, like, I don't know. I actually see myself dipping into the sub 7K pool a lot more than, like, angling for Thomas and Castro. The 3 I have tops in this range, I mean, it kind of follows pricing, but it's Berger, Gary Woodland, who we didn't talk about at all, and that's kind of a semi-course history thing, but yeah, and he is probably the highest, one of the highest volumes in here as well. And then Schwartzel. Holmes, not as much. He's been in a little bit of a skid lately. He's not even at his normal 7,400 spot. I think that represents maybe a fair price, but I don't know. I think you just like the 7K tier range the way that I like the 6K tier range. I don't know. Berger's the only one that jumps out to me.
Okay, I think that's fair to a degree. I like Justin Thomas. Castro, I probably will fade. I think that's chasing a little bit, but I think some sharp guys will be on him. Shout out to 288. Had him last week with one of the best teams, Nady Jones, who've been crushing golf. Both on the Castro train, so saw some sharp guys on him, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think why you and I are so far apart on Thomas is probably this whole birdie making thing, which is probably not weighted as explicitly as far as the DraftKings scoring wise. I do have it kind of baked in as far as if someone scores more birdies than they're expected to by their fundamentals, there is some correction for that. But that's kind of one of those universal corrections. I don't know. You've been on this with Rory and Justin Thomas as well, too, like the idea of just hunting birdies and stuff. It's something I want to look into more often, but I think that's the reason we're so far apart. So I'm very open to I'm missing something on this one.
Okay, and to be fair, Justin Thomas has dropped. He was higher, but interestingly enough, guys that have passed him that are rating well now with birdie making recently is Kevin Na and Duffner, but they're all really close in range. And earlier in the year, Justin Thomas was top 10 in birdie making, or at least in weighted birdie average.
Yeah, no, there have been times I remember early on when we were doing this, we're all aboard the Justin Thomas train, and then it's just I don't know, it's maddeningly inconsistent.
Yeah.
A guy that has some decent course history, is in this tier, hit a lot of birdies recently. He's been playing well. Snedeker in that sort of mid 7 range. Any interest in him, either of you?
I have exactly replacement. It's just that's the replacement level pick to me. It's just it doesn't jump out. I don't hate it. It's just I don't know.
So are you willing to wait just recent form a little bit more in this tournament since we don't have as much to go on with course history or anything else? Maybe recent form just gets a little bit more of a bump?
I think we covered this on when we talked about majors, actually, right? Because when you don't have any course history go off of data, it's I think the conclusion we came to was just because sometimes you will be missing information, and the correct play isn't necessarily to dial up the knobs and other things because you're missing other stuff. Sometimes it's just your edge is less, and I think this tournament falls into that under all other categories. I don't think just because you're missing information, you don't necessarily change your. I think you get in trouble by changing up your process dramatically when it's not warranted.
Okay, fair enough. All right, let's go to these next 5 guys. This is going to be just right above Phil. Just Kuchar, Bubba, Matsuyama, who Pete already talked about, Reed and Casey. So I'll let you have a chance here, Colin, to give your thoughts
All right,
on Matsuyama.
what's our cutoff? Because I believe in rules.
Just up to Adam Scott, and then we'll talk about those sort of top. I think they're the pretty clear-cut top 5 guys here, so I figured we'd give them our own section.
Yeah, so excluding Adam Scott.
Yep, I grouped him with a 4 above.
All right. This is so this is I have Reed as the top. I have Reed as the top play in this group. It's not a great course history for sure. I have the best value is Kuchar, except he has abysmal course history. I don't know, between the mix of value and solid course history and fit, I think the only one I could see playing in this range is Bubba. There's no glaring flaws other than, it's a little bit low volume, but you get that with some of these top players. I get Matsuyama. It's fine. The course history is a little light there for my liking. But Watson is the only one besides Paul Casey, who I just think is too expensive overall. That has so Watson's the only one that I could see rostering.
Yeah, I like Matsuyama. I think Patrick Reed's fine too. Patrick Reed is totally a gut narrative. He's been a top 10 machine. I know he cares a ton about the Ryder Cup. Love seeing his passion. One of the only guys on the American team that I really love the fight in. And I think he's kind of peaking at the right time relatively. Has a chance to win it. So that's a guy I'll have in GPPs. But for me, I think Matsuyama is the best play in this tier.
Cool. I think a really interesting guy in one of our PGA chats actually going off right now. One of the guys was talking about Casey and his interesting price point, which I think is a sort of sharp notice here. So Casey is at 9.5. So all these guys are pretty close to each other in pricing, but it goes from Patrick Reed at 9K to Paul Casey at 9.5, and then up to Adam Scott at 10.1. So could sort of transition to this top group of guys, which is Adam Scott, Jason Day, Jordan Spieth, Rory, and DJ, the sort of the consensus top guys. But Casey, I think, is interesting because a lot of people would either just say, okay, I'm just going to get up to Scott, or I'm going to go down and get the savings with Reed or Matsuyama. Pete, what are your thoughts about that? It seems like that's the leverage play is Casey, if you could swallow that at all.
I'm not on Casey this week as much. I've been on the Casey train. Felt really good about the call with him when he had that incredible recent GIR stat. And I think he's hot, and there's going to be people still on. But, give me Adam Scott for a little bit more. And I still think, in a vacuum, I might even prefer Matsuyama heads up to Casey in this spot. And Matsuyama's cheaper by a good bit. But
where do you think their ownerships are going to be? Do you think people would go down to Reed or Matsuyama just because of the savings, and they, like you, would think that it's probably close to heads up?
It's possible, but he's been so hot, and I think people.
Recency. Okay.
Yeah, it's a combination of recency bias, but yeah, predicting ownership is definitely huge here, especially in GPPs. So I'm still trying to gauge that. Obviously, the DraftKings Golf Championships, the big thing I'm focused on now, and it's just hard. I really don't know what the best strategy is. So yeah, it's tricky, but maybe he goes contrarian because of that. But it's just hard. If there's other things working against him, he'd be a great play in tournaments this week if he hadn't been so hot, because his price point is clearly above where it should be relative to other guys. So
fair enough. Okay, well, Pete, take us right into that top tier. So those top 5 guys, who do you like the most? I mean, DJ is obviously hard to argue against. He's probably been the best golfer this year, and this is the final tournament of the year, so it's the year of DJ in the final tournament.
Yeah, the narrative street, you gotta love DJ as the number one guy. Complete the perfect year. It does seem like everything's going his way. So if I had to pick one guy to win, I'd take him. For DraftKings, man, this range is tough. You can make good argument for everyone. I think my favorite play overall is Adam Scott in the range. I love the way he's been playing recently. I think he has some of the best long iron play of anyone. The big bugaboo is always the putting, but I'm willing to kind of embrace the putting variance of Adam Scott in this spot with no cut. And, I think he's a great play. I mean, Rory, obviously, when he's hot, he's probably the best golfer on tour when he's, in terms of DraftKings scoring. I mean, he really pummels in terms of his scoring upside. And then Spieth, didn't he win here last year? So, I mean, he won here last year to complete everything in his magical year. So there's a reason to like him as well. Yeah, it's just tough. Colin, what are your thoughts here?
Well, we haven't covered the most pressing question yet. Why is Jason Day priced 4th out of 5 in this group?
He withdrew last week.
Right. So is that okay? So let's talk about his injury risk, right? So you said that a $10 million first place at least mitigates that risk of injury, right? Or is like his injury truly going to affect his play that much? Do you think it's enough to drop him? Like, what do you think a healthy Jason Day would be priced at?
I think he'd be right there with Rory and Dustin Johnson.
Yeah, I have him about like at 11.5. Like, that's a huge drop from 11.5 to 10.3. I think he's the overwhelmingly largest value in the top tier, and I just don't think that price drop is warranted. So I was wondering is this like a price, almost like a classic pricing inefficiency from the majors type of thing, where like when they release futures prices 2 weeks out, his future price has injury withdrawal baked in, but by the time that the tournament rolls around, like we'll know if he's going to withdraw or not. So like if he is in fact good to go, then like by definition he represents value. Do you see where I'm coming out with that? Like, does that make sense, or like am I missing something?
No, it totally makes sense. It's just a matter of diagnosing this injury. One thing about Jason Day, listening to some he was on the JJ Redick podcast. I mean, he is chasing titles, so that's another reason. There's all the incentive in the world, but here's the quote from the Golf Channel. Day characterized himself as cautiously optimistic about this week as he tries to move on from what was diagnosed as a hitched joint capsule in his lower back.
It doesn't sound great.
No.
It doesn't inspire confidence, but he's definitely the best value, like assuming he's healthy. So, yeah, I mean, he can win the FedEx Cup in $10 million. I think he's going to gut it out. But, like, if it really flares up on him, like, the thing that also is very bizarre is he withdrew, I think, after 8 holes on Sunday of last week. Like, if it was even close, I think he tries to finish, but he clearly was, like, really, really bothering him. I mean, he only had 10 minutes to finish the tournament.
I mean, it is pretty fitting that we close out the year on like trying to answer an injury question, which we've never been able to do that well. At least I haven't been able to do all that well from data alone. I still have Jason Day as projected as the top. That's because the withdrawal got a discounted weight and injury isn't like baked into projections. But like it's just so overwhelming in this case. I'm wondering if he's going to be. The other interesting question is Jason Day's ownership. I know at the top level, people tend to get gun shy around the slightest amount of injury, so that would compress it, but it is really good value here, so that'll increase it. I have no idea where that equilibrium ends up in something like the championship, and that's a really interesting one.
I think people are sharp. People are chasing first, and this is the most intriguing thing. I just have no idea how owned he's going to be. I mean, he's a great play, if assuming he's healthy and take the risk, no balls, no glory, kind of thing. But at the same time, if he has to withdraw, you're just drawing dead.
Yeah.
If you have him and he drops out, even on like the 3rd round, even a lot of people didn't get through in the golf championship, and it worked out in my favor because he withdrew that 4th round. I mean, no-cut events, not finishing the tournament is just devastating. So
yeah.
Is that risk reward rationally priced in? Is it a bunch of hyper rational actors?
It is.
Like it is arguably like more so than any other tournament in the year. Like, and so this is where you have to bust out your game theory calculator and figure out the Nash equilibrium of the championship or something really high level. It gets really like I just see everybody at the high level like out leveling themselves this week.
That's what's going to happen.
Way. Like yeah, I'm sure you can spin yourself in a knots like no problem, but that's what makes it a fun game. I don't mean that it's a bad thing. It's just this is where it gets super interesting.
No, it is interesting, and I'm excited to see how ownership breaks down, and I feel pretty good about the process. And I just wish there's a little bit more. I wish I was more confident in some of these plays. It's a tough course fit, and it's a tough structure, and it's just one of those weeks where I think the skill edge is mitigated a lot, and Jason Day represents the ultimate boom or bust, which is very enticing, and just I wonder how many people are thinking like that. And the risk of injury too is very high, so it'll be intriguing to see what people do with him. I guess we should pick golfers that we think are going to win real quick, guys.
Yeah. We can.
Yeah, it's a vanity title. Oh, we could tie this at the very end. I guess this does count for the same season. We have a chance of.
We already crowned Bryan. We can start.
Yeah, like that's fine.
This is just for fun. Just pick whoever you want.
Okay.
Go ahead, Colin.
Grio, just because nothing would make me happier.
Oh my gosh! All right, go ahead, Bryan.
I've been asking why you guys hate Jordan Spieth all year, so I'm gonna just roll with it. Jordan Spieth is just gonna come out of nowhere and win it.
If I wanted to be a jerk and just take all the equity, I'd take DJ, who's clearly the choice. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to take Adam Scott.
Yeah, no, sticking to your guns. I appreciate that.
Sounds good.
All right, well, Pete, good luck in the
Yeah, good luck, man.
I'll definitely need it. So appreciate it, boys.
Yeah, we'll be cheering hard for you. Everyone, good luck as you guys play. There's some awesome tournaments. There's a really cool $4 100K to first place. That's the Ford Championship on DraftKings. So if you won some money in NFL, you want to give PGA a try, it's a great week to do so before we have our break. So good luck. Thanks for listening this year, and we'll talk to you guys in a couple weeks.